So thanks, Johnny, for your session. And everybody, welcome to mission number 9 as part of the Cloud Planning Summit. We're here to talk about how we integrate service management with cloud, containers, and DevOps. It's a conversation both myself and Pam are having pretty frequently with our customers out there. So by way of introduction, my name is Ryan Hale. I've been at Ahead for 4 years. I've been in the ITSM and ServiceNow ecosystem for 11, and I run the ServiceNow practice at Ahead that we refer to as ESM or Enterprise Service Management. And with me, I've got Pam. I'll let Pam introduce herself, and then we'll go ahead and get going. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Hey, everybody. This is Pam Coffey. I'm in Ahead's Field CTO organization. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Ryan and I wanted to have this session because both of us are fielding questions in our respective areas of expertise with our customers all the time. So a lot of modern apps, a lot of development going on. You've probably seen that if you attended any previous sessions during the week, last 3 days. So our customers are saying, how these two glue together? So that's kind of why we wanted to have this talk today. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hey, Ryan, how about I start off kind of from my perspective? I'm going to be playing the developer role. I'll give the audience an idea of kind of how things look from my perspective, and then maybe we roll into how that impacts you.
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. And I'm well experienced playing the role of the operations guy, and I'll try to make your world as easy as possible.
So here we go. In order to support the business, we have a lot of initiatives around modernizing our most critical and revenue-generating apps. And that's kind of the characteristics of that are here on the screen. First of all, we're changing how the apps are architected. They're now made of thousands of small services that are ephemeral. They come and go. And for example, we don't patch. We just build a new one. And we also, in order to meet the scale and the demands of the business, we have to deploy more frequently. And our deployment, not like in the old days, our deployments now are fully automated. So that's really impacting the way we do handoffs with operations, the whole dev and ops concepts, right? Change management could potentially get in our way if we're going to move at the speed that we want to move. The other thing is, because we're trying to support the business, we want to produce revenue. So we've got to be able to predict the cost it takes to modernize and to use the cloud, for example, and align that back to our projects to know that we don't want to go spend a lot of time developing, modernizing some application and it doesn't impact revenue. And then I absolutely hate to see our CISO and our VP of security walk down the hallway, because what does this whole thing do to their world, impacting security and compliance? So that's kind of my world. Maybe let's take a look at how it impacts your world.
Yeah, and Pam, I think a lot of the challenges that you guys are facing on the developer side of the house, we face a kind of a mirrored challenge. So, you guys are concerned about the cost of modernizing apps. As the group that's responsible for owning and operating these things, we're concerned about the total cost of ownership. And as you are iterating, builds in the cloud, how do we make sure that, we're shutting those down so that we don't just have, compute power that's out there that's running up the taxi meter, so to speak. When we talk about, are we really getting value out of the work that we're doing? We want to look at, KPIs. We want to make sure that from an operations perspective, we're allocating the right teams and the right staff to the right stuff. And then, you talk about security and compliance. We're just as concerned about that as you guys are, because, right, we used to own all of our assets. They used to be in our data center, and now they're not. Now they're in somebody else's. So how do we ensure that, from a compliance perspective and from a security perspective, my ops team is covered. And when the CISO walks down the hallway, we're not hiding under our desks, just like you guys don't want to be hiding under our desks. And really what we want to do is take a very holistic approach to helping you guys release, your software as quickly but as safely and responsibly as possible. And also to ensure that the business is getting the right value and the right outcome.
So we definitely are facing the same problems from a different lens.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we can take a little bit of time over the next bit to talk through how we could potentially work a little bit better together, I think we'll end up, landing on a spot where, while our worlds are very different and we have different lenses that we look at them through, we're motivated by a lot of the same stuff.
I think that leads us into our next slide, Ryan. This concept of value stream management. So the Forrester Wave is on the right-hand side there, and you can see ServiceNow is one of the top performers. Value stream management is all about helping software teams plan, build, and release software that literally impact the business, and you know the impact. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. There's 4 key components: metrics and KPIs about that whole process, the ability to analyze that data, the ability to provide automated governance. We still have to have governance. We still have to talk to the CISO and the VP of security and all of that kind of stuff, but we want to automate that to the extent possible. And it's critical that we keep our compliance posture. So the rest of our pitch is going to kind of talk about some of the key components here of value stream management. Maybe let's start with you at that business alignment layer.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we really strive to do, or if organizations are operating well and also operating in a mature model, we understand, the life cycle of the services that are moving through the chain, right? And that could be new applications that we are deploying. That could be new applications that we are going to be pushing into production, or that could just be applications that we've had for a while that we need to modernize. And what we want to be able to do on the operations side of things is get visibility, into that early, so we can understand the demand from, either our internal users or our external users. And we use, a portfolio of projects or programs, or depending on, your organization, maybe you're making the shift from project to product, but a lot of the same concepts apply here. The fun part is, for a lot of organizations, the front end. How do we create the idea? How do we generate the idea? How do we deploy the idea? There's a lot of value and a lot of complexity on how do we run the idea? How do we enhance the idea? And that's where we look at things like, project and portfolio management. It's something that we'll talk about ServiceNow here in a little bit. They do a very good job of that. And a subcomponent of that, right, if we look at, kind of operational readiness and allocation of resources, we really need a way to ensure that we've got the right teams working on the right stuff. Back, prior to joining Ahead, I worked at ServiceNow. I was a product owner. And one of the things that you always had to think through was, what features do I need to deploy versus what defects do I need to remediate? And if I've got a fixed pool of development capacity, where do I want to point those resources so that I'm delivering the best value to my customer base? And that's really where we start to align the value. And what you need is you need a robust system with, a high degree of interoperability to be able to consume, process, route, manage, and measure a lot of that work.
So this sounds like one of the main reasons ServiceNow is in that top area of the Forrester Wave in value stream management.
Yeah, I think it certainly is, Pam. And one thing to kind of set the stage here, I've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem for a very long time, and ServiceNow's always had a very good brand as a workflow engine, right? Replacing email-based processes, things of that nature. It's always had a good reputation, and deservedly so, around being able to integrate with other enterprise tools and technologies like, the SAPs of the world and like the Workdays of the world. And what we're starting to see a lot more of is, because of that really robust API architecture that they have, we can take some of those, I'm going to say, more traditional enterprise integrations and the ability to do that, and we can point those really, Pam, at your world and what you want to do. So you talked about, ensuring that we've got automated governance and that we are compliant. I'm on the operations side of the house. I don't like going through audits as much as anybody else does. And the more we can integrate and automate what that process looks like and how those systems are interacting and passing data, the easier it really is on everybody.
So let's show the audience an example of how that works in the ServiceNow platform from my perspective. Across the top is the general idea of releasing software, right? You're planning for it, developing it, building it, testing it, deploy, and then managing it later. Across the bottom are typical tools from my world. Maybe I'm using Jira or Azure for the planning. I have various source code repositories listed there, build tools and quality test tools. So I think what you're saying is, since the Now platform is able to ingest all of this. We can still use workflows. We can still use a common data model for managing that automated compliance, managing that automated governance, and providing some of the metrics and key performance analytics that value stream management calls for. So I guess what we're saying is the Now platform with that centralized common services data model is the glue between us both. So I'm going to be able to deploy in an automated way. I'm going to get more metrics about how many times I did a deployment and how it went. I'm going to have more insights and analytics, but also you're going to have the visibility and capabilities that you need as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. I mean, I think when I'm talking to customers about embarking on this journey and really where to start, first thing is getting folks like you and I in a room together. Second thing is, ensuring that we're going into that room with a collaborative effort in mind. And then it really becomes the process of talking through, from our perspective, how do we make your guys' lives easier? But then also, how do we ensure that we're harvesting the right information and the right data so that from an operations perspective, we understand A, what's going on in the environment, but then B, how do we cycle that information kind of back to your world so that, if you've got a container or a cluster that is continually failing, but then repopulating, maybe we don't have an end user impact. But that's certainly data we want to push back into your build process so we can get some of those things fixed, right? Just so that we have, standard and reliable architecture. And when we sit down and we start to have the conversation around connecting dev and ops, and we start talking about how do we stitch together the tool chains that exist in your world, I really think it's a natural fit to start to ingest a lot of that information into ServiceNow. And what we typically see there is, right, an increase in something that in the ITSM world we call a standard change, which is a pre-approved change that can get deployed into production without needing to go through a change advisory board. From our perspective, we want to get you guys enabled with as many of those as we can. So that way you guys can deploy as quickly as you can, but we also want to make sure we've got the right governance and metrics in place to ensure we're doing things safely.
Well, let's drill into that change automation just a little bit more, because that's a great point, Ryan. And I think it's also a particular point of concern for developers and people on my side of the fence. What we don't want is this. Kind of the old world is I had to go fill out a form. I created a change request. I had to wait on approval. That then had to wait on a CAB to might meet every 2 weeks. That got another level of approval. I had to wait on a change window. And then finally, I get that approval and that change window open and I can deploy. That could be weeks. So that doesn't work in our modern applications world. We want to scale, test new features daily, deploy weekly, all of that kind of thing. So I think what we're saying with the ServiceNow platform and the integration with my tools is it can be more like this. I'm going to, via API, as part of my software pipeline and my build process, create that change via API within ServiceNow. The platform itself can use data, and the data that we decide to put in there for gathering risk and evaluating the risk, again, via API, with however mechanisms we want. We'll have policies set that validate based on those risks, whether we are approved or not. And that's all automated, no human intervention. And there we go, we can deploy. So we're now under 5 minutes to have what used to be a manual process that took weeks. And it sounds like because the metrics about, how many times I tried and what the risks were and all of that kind of stuff, I can run reports with a lot more information than I could if we were doing this totally manual. Sounds like that's kind of what we're talking about. Yeah,
Pam, that's absolutely what we're talking about. And, there was one customer that, from a head perspective, we were working with, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that was a little bit ahead of their time. And they were in the financial services space, and they did the same exact thing. So they were an Azure shop, they were a ServiceNow shop. All of their deployments that they were doing through Azure and Azure DevOps were feeding ServiceNow. They were triggering the change processes. They were tracking the deploys. They were doing, controlled inserts into the CMDB so we knew what was where at any given point in time. And through that, it gave a lot of visibility into how often they were deploying, how safely they were deploying, and really helped streamline their release cycle.
That's a great segue into our next slide, which is exactly that example. So across the top of the tools that I'm using, they fit right in with some of the conversations we've had during our virtual cloud summit. So I'm using Azure boards for my backlog to track what I'm going to work on. I have Azure repos for code repositories and being able to commit new code. And then I'm using Azure pipelines to build, test, and deploy. Over the right-hand side is kind of what pops out of all of that is our Ahead's portal. And I think what we're talking about here is via API, plugging that right into ServiceNow. Why don't you walk the group through kind of what's going on down at the bottom there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think a big shift that we're starting to see, and it's been picking up steam over the last little bit within the ServiceNow ecosystem, is letting teams work within the tools that they want to work within, right? So that could be Azure boards, that could be Jira. But from an enterprise perspective, from kind of the ops and governance side of things, we still need visibility to that. So if you've got, a team working on, within Azure, you got a team working within AWS, you've got a team working within GCP. Maybe they've got different boards, maybe they've got different tools to groom their backlog, but we want to be able to ingest those into work items into ServiceNow so we get visibility into them. As you're getting ready to commit your code, we want to track those as commit records. That's going to flow into job builds. This, kind of the left portion of this slide is really what was kind of historically referred to as the release management process. So how are we packaging up features and, bundling those into a, either scheduled or ad hoc release, and then change management as the gatekeeper to production, right, is saying, yep, you guys are ready to go. Let's go ahead and get those deployed. So as we look at the kind of the right side of the slide, where we trigger more of the kind of traditional ITSM processes, we'll have change records. Those change records will look at our change policies. That would be things like, blackout windows, risk assessments. One of the things as we move into a more automated fashion that we do need to be concerned about is our SLAs and our SLOs. So as we do an automated build, granted that build and that change may be pre-approved, but will it cause any sort of downtime or impact? And will that impact our uptime SLA to, either our internal or our external customers? We can leverage ServiceNow to, do some intelligence, do some checking on that so we can ensure that we're not going to have any impacts there. When we look at the analytics and reporting, ServiceNow is a very, very robust reporting engine, particularly when somebody adds on a feature set they call performance analytics, which does more of the time series reporting. It can start to give a whole bunch of insight into how well, particular groups, business units, or dev teams as individuals are, pushing work through the environment. And it's this sort of visibility that really kind of gets into kind of the foundation of value stream management and how we track and manage that.
Really good. So we've talked about how I need to move fast and at scale, but we also need to glue dev and ops together. Those are kind of key components of value stream management. We've talked about that automated governance around change management. So I think let's just bring it up a level to how all of that stuff maps back into business value. Because again, value stream management is about developing software at scale very quickly for business impact and business value. We'll let you walk through this next slide.
So one of the ways to really kind of think through this is to start at the center of, kind of the center of the universe, right, which is the CMDB. And the CMDB has been a very challenging thing to get right for organizations since a configuration management database was a thing. And one of the ways that ServiceNow has helped organizations solve for this is they've got a reference architecture and a data model they call the Common Services Data Model, which really just kind of overlays on top of the modules and applications that are part of the platform, as well as the CMDB itself. And that's really what helps start to give organizations the ability to stitch things in terms of their enterprise strategy to their portfolio of projects. And I'll pause here for just a second. One of the really key things around this model is being able to ingest ideas from either our external users or our internal users, be able to score and rank those so we understand what impact they could potentially have, either positive or negative, to the portfolio of applications and services that we offer. And we want to translate that into an enterprise backlog. So one of the nice things we've been talking about is ServiceNow's interoperability between tools and technologies. It also has interoperability in terms of how you want to manage and run projects. So the same platform that can help you on your DevOps journey can also help you if you're going to plan a data center move, which is going to be a little bit more of a waterfall type approach, but certainly will have implications and impacts to the services of portfolios you're going to operate if you're doing something with, let's just say, a private cloud build.
And I would say, from my perspective too, just this linkage that you're showing across the top there, if I can interrupt a minute, if I'm tying it to strategy, if the platform is tying it to strategy, goals, and funding, then my application development project should have better funding because we're making that linkage back to the business strategy. Am I seeing that right?
When you're doing it right, you're absolutely seeing it right, because we should be able to tie something that ServiceNow calls intake and demand, right, to these strategic initiatives, which then kind of flow into the investments that we're going to make. And Pam, those investments that we're going to make, right, could be on an infrastructure side, could be on the app side, but this is really where we start to see the visibility into all, again, in an ideal world, all this cool stuff that we build, we know why we built it. We know who paid for it to be built. We know who our customers are. And we've got, kind of a chain of custody or a red thread that's starting to connect all these things together. And then the next question is like, well, once we deploy it into production, how do we handle the operational side of things? And, we have it covered there as well in terms of building out those operational processes. So we've got incidents, we've got problems, we've got changes on the traditional ITSM side of things that we will log against our infrastructure and our applications. We've got security threats that are out there that are going to impact, right, our end users, our applications, and our infrastructure. And when we look at how do we want to control and manage, our compliance posture, right, we've got governance, risk, and compliance as part of that as well. So as we start to get these systems integrated with ServiceNow, they're sharing a lot more data. It becomes a really powerful tool for our application owners, our business stakeholders, and even in a lot of cases, right, executive leadership to understand really what's going on in their environment and help them run IT a whole heck of a lot more like a business. Pam, I don't know about you, I continually see organizations that aren't in the product business start to shift to more of this model where they're taking a bit more of a product management type approach, moving away from traditional projects so that they can ingest ideas against applications and products and really start to stitch this whole thing together.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree 100% more. Also, I think this is a lot we've covered, and certainly a lot on this particular slide. Let's talk about some next steps. I know a lot of the people out there may want to get a little more educated through a deep dive session. Ahead can offer those on either the DevOps side or the service management side or the glue together that we've been talking about today. Talk about some of the other things there that the group might want to do as next steps. Yeah,
absolutely. Those deep dive sessions are a great way to have an initial conversation with Pam, myself, or somebody on our teams. We can do a paid engagement for a tool and value mapping session for kind of one critical application, so we can help start to decouple and decompose not only the applications themselves, but the tooling that helps you deliver and deploy features there. Value stream is a pretty new thing, so check out Forcer's value stream content. We've got that linked out on our website, and always feel free to reach out to us, via contact@thinkahead.com. That'll get over to our marketing group, and they can always help get you in contact with us. And then Pam, I think at this stage, we're probably ready to answer any questions. I looked around my office like somebody was going to chime in, but hopefully we've got some questions out there on the internet.
Right. Let's move to Q&A, and I think there is a Q&A chat panel kind of down the bottom. If you'll enter whatever questions, we'll do our best to answer. All right, Ryan, we have a couple of questions based on some of the information we gave out. Seems like it was a lot. A couple of questions have been around where do we get started? What's the biggest pain point we should address? What do you recommend from an ESM side of the house is the first thing you do? And then the same question was kind of directed to the developer side of the house. So why don't you answer first? What's the place to get started?
Yeah, Pam, what I would say when we look at this, and one of the ways we want to ensure that we can get started is understanding two things. So kind of thing number one, in terms of being good stewards to service management, is what compliance and controls do we need to ensure that we're checking the boxes on, so that way we can help kind of coach and guide you guys into the right automation strategy, so we can streamline kind of your path to production. When we look at value stream management and mapping, the other piece that we need to work with customers on is establishing that kind of portfolio of applications and the structure through which we can roll up, ideas, feature requests on the kind of generative side of things, as well as the metrics that we're going to use to measure and manage how those applications are operating and running within our environments.
Good deal. And I think on my side, the place to start is making sure that change management is not in the way. So the ability to do the more automated API-driven integration with our pipelines and our build process is probably the place to start from my perspective. Let's see. Another question is, do you really see a lot of friction between the ServiceNow side and the DevOps side? Is this, are we just creating a problem that's not really a problem? So why don't you answer it first from, is there pain, is there friction from your perspective if this isn't addressed?
So I would say the answer is yes. Any customers that we work with, right? I think anybody that's out there on the phone, they've all been through a painful, change advisory board meeting, right? Where you're missing a piece of data, or you thought your test plan was documented well, turns out it's not, and you got to go back to the drawing board. You miss your change window. I think it certainly does create friction. I mean, this is what I will say is, in the over decade of doing this, at least from my perspective, we've been having a lot of the similar talk tracks. We're finally kind of embarking on a place where we've got the right focus from the industry and the ecosystem, as well as the right tooling to start to automate some of that toil and some of that pain away.
Great. And kind of a follow-on question from the audience. How do you do a cloud transformation with ServiceNow kind of in the center of the solution if no one on our internal team, in our internal organization from the ServiceNow side of the house is on the cloud team? So I'll take a stab at that one, and then you can jump in. I think where I've seen it be very successful is at least the architects from the ESM side of the house are embedded, just like developers and ops had to create DevOps. It's the ESM people are on that same team as well. So organizationally, having representation from the ServiceNow side of the house, along with the cloud, the developer, the infrastructure side of the house is all very important from an organizational alignment standpoint.
Yeah, Pam, I think you hit all of the high nails. I will say, ServiceNow folks are generally speaking all very nice folks and very interested in cloud and cloudy things. So if they're not part of your cloud team, include them in those conversations. What I would say is, our perspective, we look at ServiceNow as a platform to solve business problems and drive business solutions. So as long as we orient the conversation around what are the needs of the business, how do we get there, it really does help kind of shape a more productive dialogue, in terms of how your team should be structured. That's more of an organizational design bit, and I'd love to get a little bit more information. Maybe we can set up a follow-on conversation to dig into the details of that, because there's a lot of different ways you can and could do it. What I will say, kind of using ahead as an example, we've got a whole cloud practice. We've got a whole ServiceNow practice. Part of that is, our teams are very separate but equal. We do a lot of cross-practice collaboration. We do a lot of work in the Ahead Lab to, leverage ServiceNow, right, and integrate that with Azure, with AWS, with on-prem automation. Because at the end of the day, right, we're generally speaking engineers and tinkerers that like to build, kind of cool new stuff, and it just gives us a bigger sandbox to play in.
Great. And here's a question from somebody that must have watched Mission 8 with Johnny Hatch and the observability track, because of making a very good point. Does that observability, he showed correlation, integration with ServiceNow in his demo and talked through in his slides, does that also play into value stream management?
Absolutely. I mean, the more visibility that we get into how our applications are running and performing, right, that's going to help inform our projects or our product roadmaps. to drive improvement and drive value. So, Johnny and I have a lot of conversations around how do we bake observability into the very beginning of these processes, and how do we ensure we're using ServiceNow as the platform to do some of those checks. So, Pam, that's absolutely correct.
Well, those are all very good questions. I don't see any more in the Q&A window. Is there anything else coming in from the moderator? Looks like no is the answer. So thank you very much for those that attended the summit. Thank you for attending this session. And we'll turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Ryan. Great stuff as always from two of our best at Ahead. Well, that wraps up our first ever Cloud Summit, and I hope you enjoyed it. But hopefully it's not our last interaction, because one thing we've heard and what you've all learned is that the journey to cloud adoption at scale is not a brief one, nor is it an easy one. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to again thank our clients, Xcel Energy, Consumers Energy, United Airlines, who took the time out of their busy schedules to participate. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors who helped make this thing happen. All the summit content will be available on demand shortly for a few months. So we will be in touch with the necessary links so that you can share this content with your colleagues who may have missed the live version this week. So thank you again. Have a great day. Have a great end to the year and stay safe. We'll see you again soon.